So just the fact that they thought about the same milkshake in two different ways gave us two biological different responses. And this is where now we're beginning to understand that how mindset can actually affect our biology in a very real way. So if you have a negative mindset about something, it's going to really affect your brain in a way that's going to negatively impact your performance in that particular field. So dopamine is a chemical that's crucially important in the reward pathway. Actually, dopamine is what we call the molecule of more, because it's the molecule or the neuromodulator that makes us seek more. It's also important in movement. So motivation, like when you wake up in the morning, you want to get your workout done. That's dopamine talking to you. But dopamine also has a negative side to it. Too much of dopamine actually saturates the receptors on which dopamine acts. To achieve the same result, you need bigger and bigger levels of dopamine. It's like a drug. It's like if you're addicted to crack cocaine. So that's the same thing that happens with social media. So the more you expose yourself to it, the more of it you need to achieve the same feeling of contentment or happiness.
I am Venki, a working professional in IT as well as an amateur masters athlete and a coach for endurance sports. You are listening to the Working Athlete podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, I have a small request from you. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also let me know what you like and what you would like to listen to more of by commenting in the comment section on YouTube. I promise to do my best to improve with each episode and bring you the best content that helps you and me get better each day. In this episode, we talk to Dr. Arvind Bhateja. Dr. Arvind is the very first guest on this podcast. 3 years and 160 episodes later, it was great to sit down with him in person and talk about some very important topics. Arvind comes with not just a wealth of knowledge from the medical side, but also tons of practical experience in endurance sports over the last 15 years. In this episode, we talked about the importance of mindset, the power of our internal narratives, and the role exercise plays in our mental health. We also talked in detail about aging and the role exercise plays in aging. He shares some very practical steps that all of us can take to improve the quality of life as we age. It was an amazing conversation with some really practical takeaways for me. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. This episode is brought to you by The Bike Affair. If you are in search of a one-stop destination that caters to all your cycling needs, our today's sponsor, The Bike Affair, is the perfect place to check out. I have known the founders of The Bike Affair, Krish and Gokul, personally for nearly 15 years now. In fact, my first century ride was with Krish back in 2008. They are both exceptional human beings and entrepreneurs that believe in providing exceptional service to their customers. And it shows. With over 14 years of experience, the Bike Affair has established itself as a trusted source offering honest advice and exceptional service. They are offering a special treat for the listeners of this podcast. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order by using the code BikeyVenki on their website. So if you are in Hyderabad, visit their store in Kondapur, or if you are anywhere else in India, shop online by using the link thebikeaffair.com. I will leave the link in the show notes. Now, enjoy the podcast. Hi, Skipper. Welcome to the Working Athlete podcast.
Thanks, Venki.
So, this podcast actually started, with you, with the interaction that we had.
That's right.
Over Zoom.
Yeah.
Back in 2020. August 2020 was when that conversation was recorded. We were all, I think, in partial lockdowns or something.
That's right.
And So you were kind enough to be the very first guest on the podcast. So it is, and since then we have done one more episode, I think, for giving back.
That's right.
But this is great to sit face to face again and chat.
And I'm delighted to be here and to see how phenomenally the podcast has grown in many ways, not just with the way you've managed to be so dedicated in putting out episodes every single week without missing a single week.
Yeah,
That's been an amazing run of consistency. And also the kind of the wide spectrum of people that you've been able to get on the podcast and the tech that's changed dramatically over the last 3 years. That's awesome to see that. You really set out with a dream, clearly, and I would say you achieved it.
I don't know about setting out with a dream, but I've just, like I was talking about with you before, the idea was just to, start something so that it can help me stay on track. Keep talking with people, like-minded people, and pick their brains, and what is working for them, what is not working for them. That is what the idea behind the whole thing was. And it just I've been lucky to have awesome people around like yourself, and supporting me all the time, and managed to, I'm amazed myself that I've managed to keep going without missing a week for last 160 odd weeks. So
That's really quite an amazing run. And in the process of educating yourself, I think you educated the rest of us as well.
thank you. That's anyway, that's the goal, to reach out to similar working athletes, and maybe share the experiences with all the people out there.
So before you get to asking me a question, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Let's reverse roles a little bit.
Sure, sure.
So what are your 3 biggest takeaways from all the episodes you've done?
That's an amazing question. That's an amazing question. See, one thing, there are many, and it is not that I remember everything, all the time. That's why it is important for me to keep consistently doing this, because these are kind of constant reminders for myself as I go along, right? Some of the things that that come to mind are, one during one episode with Naveen John, he talked about how it is very important to maintain a fitness basement, right? Don't go below that basement, so that whenever you want to, whenever there is an event or something like that, you can tweak it and build on that basement. So don't go below that basement. Try to maintain consistency is one thing that
So true of almost everything in life.
Exactly. So that is something that I keep reminding myself. So you don't need to be at the peak all the time. Just maintain a semblance of consistency, and you will be fine. I mean, although I haven't been able to achieve that all the time, but it kind of helps most of the times. Another thing would be, workout or sweat every day. That is another thing that he shared. It is not from him, but I think from Rich Roll or someone. Sweat every day. So that is something that keeps me on guard as well. That keep going. And very recently, Nirupa actually shared something about breaking up with Sam, which is sugar, alcohol, and maida. So these things, and she added another M to it, saying milk. Sam, break up with Sam to be able to maintain and lose weight and maintain it. So I think these are the things that keep me. It's like constant reminders for myself as I go along. That so funnily enough, after the episode with Nirupa, I went to Crankmeister to drop my bike for service, right? And usually near Crankmeister, if I am there, I it's a must visit place is an Albert's Bakery
For the Koya naan.
for the Koya naan, right?
Yeah.
So that day I remember this, and I was like, it was so fresh in the memory that okay, I had to skip that, and I went down the road, and I was hungry by that time, and it is my routine whenever I go, pick up a couple of koyanans and go, right, or eat something and go. But that day I stopped by a fruit stall and cut fruit. I had a couple of bowls of cut fruit and went home. Still satisfied my hunger, but it kind of helps me, refreshing my memory, keep reminding these.
So for you, it was a breakup with AB, Albert Bakery.
Yes. So yeah. So and yeah, that's a great question to start with, and thanks for that.
Good to recap
Yeah.
what happened in the last 3 years.
Yeah. There are so many. There's so many because, none of us are perfect. None of us is perfect, but all of us have something or the other that we can learn from
That's true.
others. So that is where each of our journeys have a common thread, but each of us, our stories are unique, right? So that is what I hope to get out of this, take those stories, learn from them, and share with others. So now that you are here, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about like various things, but related to mental health and mind and mindset and stuff like that. So let us start by talking about what the importance of mindset in life and sport.
So I think over the years, people are now beginning to understand more and more that mindset plays a very crucial role in the way we interact with not only ourselves, but also the environment around us. And the environment around us could be a multiplicity of things. It could be just life, stress. It could be food. It could be exercise and various other things, relationships.
Yeah.
So there are enough studies now that show that how we think about a certain thing actually affects how that thing will affect us.
Right. Yeah.
So there is something known as core beliefs. So let's say that I have a belief, like I did. Let's talk about myself in practical terms.
Yeah.
While I was racing, I did not like racing individual time trials. You all know this, right? For a variety of reasons. I had a back issue that I didn't enjoy that 30 or 60 minutes of suffering in solitude.
Yeah.
And so I didn't usually do well in time trials because my mindset was I'm not good at this and I don't enjoy it. So, I'm not going to do well.
Right.
And I did. But over the last year or two, I've been thinking about how I think about this particular discipline in cycling. And I've been trying to change my relationship with it to see whether I can maybe take a step back to make it a little more palatable. So instead of trying to do it in the TT tuck, I will try to do a Merckx ITT.
Right.
And I will try to give it my best shot and not look at it negatively. And it has really made a difference to my performance in ITTs. Not that I'm great at them, but it has made a difference in a small way, in a way that makes me feel a little better of maybe in looking at it in a positive way of having overcome certain limitations that I had.
So we at the end of the day, we all live in our minds, right?
Absolutely.
So this is all about perspectives. So just the other day I was talking about the episode that just went out. Nirupa was talking about how the mindset shift of uh, you know in her first triathlon, she was so disappointed that it affected her mood the entire holiday that followed her. Right? And she, instead of ruining her holiday or whatever, so for the next race she went with the mindset, it doesn't matter what time I do or how well or how bad I do, I'm going to enjoy it. It doesn't matter. I am not going to let it affect the what comes later, right?
That reminds me of one of my favorite quotations. It says, when you lose, like you lose a race or you lose in life, don't lose the lesson.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah.
So there's a lesson in everything that we do. It's up to us to get that, imbibe that lesson and learn from it. So every loss is not a failure. You can learn from the lesson.
Right. So that also kind of brings me to one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, right? Participation in races themselves. Like we all go through a lot of phases over a period of time, and we tend to enjoy the things that we are good at, right? And we don't necessarily will be good at certain things all the time, right? We might have been very good at racing at one point of time, couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, and we got into podiums and all that. We enjoyed the process because we were doing well, but then there will be a slump, invariably almost, because all things that go up have to come down. Right? So, and those things happen all the time, right? You lose focus or you lose the ability to enjoy racing or whatever because you are too focused or too focused on the result rather than enjoying the process.
Sometimes in the process of trying to do better and better at each race, we often push ourselves to the point where we're about to burn out.
Right.
And we don't realize that sometimes until somebody else points it out, or you suffer from some kind of strain or injury.
Right.
And then, every waking hour is like a slog. Because I know I did that. You know that.
Correct. Yeah.
So sometimes we don't realize how hard we're pushing ourselves because it's our brains craving that reward, that dopamine reward of the next podium, right?
Right. So how do people kind of deal with those situations? Like, what are the things that people can do to ensure that they don't fall into the trap of
Overreaching. Yeah. That's a tough situation, especially if you're a person who's very driven and very ambitious. To be able to say, yeah, okay, I'm not going to get podiums in every single race this year. Maybe I'll just target 2 or 3 races or 2 or 3 events. And it's okay that, the other events for me to just participate or just finish. I think you have to think about your athletic performance over a period of time and also factor into account that you're aging. And then you may be having other things in life on your plate, which are either unexpected or overwhelming.
Right.
And then try to see if you can balance your goals in a way that's reasonable, achievable. Now, we all talk about the SMART acronym.
Right.
So every goal has to have the acronym SMART, ideally, for it to work and be successful. So specific, it should be measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So achievability is something that we often overlook.
Right.
We sometimes set goals which are unrealistic. I can't make a goal tomorrow for myself that I want to climb Mount Everest next month. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's something that needs time. It needs energy, focus, certain milestones along the way. So I think when we're talking about setting goals for ourselves, especially athletic goals, which are obviously for us as working athletes, they're not the primary source of our income and our sustainability. These are hobbies.
Right.
And sometimes we push ourselves too hard. We don't realize how hard we're pushing ourselves, and we sometimes push ourselves to the point of burnout. You know that I've done this to myself.
Yeah.
You've seen that.
Yeah.
And we only realize that when either a friend or a relative well wisher points it out to us, or we see that in spite of us putting in more and more effort, our performance is declining or plateauing over time, or we end up with some kind of injury.
Yeah.
And then we sort of get a wake up call, that what am I doing?
Yeah.
And then we take a step back and then we reassess the situation, set a little more achievable goals, maybe postpone some of our goals by a year or two, saying it's all right. If I don't maybe do Taiwan KOM this year, I'll do it next year. It's not a goal that's running away from me.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'd rather do it when I'm in a better state of mind, in a better state of physical health, rather than forcing this goal on myself in this particular year because of some weird compulsion, right?
Right. Yeah, that is something that we often overlook. We have these goals for ourselves, and we are so focused on them that we often miss the simple fact that we are living our lives, and life gets in the way. A lot of things can be going in a different direction than what your goal is, wanting to. But you have to adjust to those, right? So that is very important. You have to be realistic, and look at achievability of it. Maybe when you set your goals, it might have looked achievable, but you have to
be willing to modify and adapt.
Correct.
According to the situation.
So coming, going on the same thread of mindset, right? What are some of the things that people can look at and see how they can have a positive or helpful mindset rather than something that doesn't help their goals?
So a few things that I think one needs to look at is being in touch with what is your internal narrative. So very often the internal narrative might be very negative about certain things, and we may not really delve into that or introspect into it consciously. We just like, okay, I don't like that.
Yeah.
For like in my case, Ironman swimming, for example, I just don't like it because I had a negative experience with it one time, and my whole mindset about open water, competitive Ironman swimming is negative.
Right.
And unless I really sit down with myself consciously and think about my mindset or my narrative regarding that, I'm not going to be able to make progress along that way. And I need to specifically think about what are the negatives. What is it about swimming in the open water that I find difficult or negative? So for me, it was jumping into the water, already being a swimmer with bad technique, jumping into the water with 350 other athletes, getting kicked and elbowed and all that in the water with a whole bunch of people, salty, murky water without any visibility, not being able to sight, losing my way, feeling dizzy and disoriented when I came out of the water, not being able to give my best on the bike because of that. So these are all the negative things. If I really want to work towards being a good Ironman swimmer, then I will have to think about how I can tackle each of these negatives.
This experience was in back in 2011 when you did
Singapore
half
Ironman. Yeah, my first and only Ironman.
Right.
Early retirement.
Before most of the triathletes in the scene even actually got started. You started dead and
Yeah, you could say that.
Right. So how can you change that narrative?
So one is you want to do something different. So maybe on purpose, or maybe there's some other higher calling. So let's say I view my inability to swim as a negative, and it's in my overall vision of myself. That's something I want to get rid of, and I want to change that into something positive. Or I have maybe a friend or someone, and we have decided to set a goal for ourselves. So, how do I change this? Is by actually writing down rather than just thinking about it or talking about it. Because if you're into journaling, then it's easier. But if you're not, then writing down specific points regarding your narrative and your goal and finding the obstacles along the goal and methodologies and techniques about how to overcome those obstacles. I think that's the logical way of going about it.
Right. So, na- working on the narratives, what other journaling is one thing. What other things can
Meditation
right
really helps as well. Because when you are meditating, then your mind is calm and then you have more clarity of thought. Your cognitive focus is much more incisive. So even a few minutes of meditation a day makes a lot of difference to your cognitive abilities the rest of the day.
Right.
The other thing that I find kind of useful is a few minutes of meditation or yoga nidra before you go to bed, and then focusing on that particular vexing issue that's on the top of your mind. When you go to sleep with that issue top of mind, then somehow the mind finds it. I know it's a bit esoteric, but somehow the mind finds a way of helping you resolve that issue to some extent, at least. Maybe a first step gives you some idea. So you wake up like, eureka, that's an idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I can work on it in that way. Let me see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the meditation is something that helped me before, but that is something that I haven't been able to stick to for a long, continuously. Maybe I'm like aiming too high. Like I need to find a 15-minute or 30-minute block in the day, or instead of that, maybe something like start with a minute or two and see and be consistent, show up every day, or like sweat every day that I just mentioned. Maybe I can apply that to that and use it to get consistent there, because I've noticed that when I was meditating for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, the mental clarity was amazing. If I am sitting with you conversing, there the amount of chatter that goes on in the mind was way less. When for say now, right, I might be thinking, how do I ask the next question and all that thing was never not there, or way less when I was practicing meditation. I think I should get back to that.
I think consistency is crucially important in life. Doing small little things every day makes a lot of difference.
Right.
And just by staying consistent, we automatically get better. And when we get better, that motivates us to stay consistent.
Exactly. Yeah. So we see that all the time with our cycling or whatever we are doing, right?
Yeah.
We show up 2-3 days and we're feeling good. We don't want to lose the gain, so we keep showing up. We should be careful to not let it slip down and go the other way. But maintaining a streak is helps in a self-fulfilling kind of virtuous cycle, or whatever they call it, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So what we are talking about narratives, right? That also kind of brings me to another thing that I have in my mind right now, that is on top of my mind, is the Nandi race that is coming up this weekend. And previously, I just got out of a bout of bronchitis that took me out of any meaningful training for say 4 weeks. And within like this weekend is the race, but previously I would have said I'm not fit enough to race. But this time, this year, for most of the races, how I showed up is I'm not going, I'm just going to show up and see how it goes. If nothing, I'll have fun with a bunch of friends for however long I can, and see how it goes. That has dramatically changed how I raced this year. You know that at the start of the year, I showed up for ITT after months of struggle, and I was on the podium. But it is not the podium that actually helped me feel better, and but it is the mindset, the taking away all the pressure of performance and seeing what is the best I can do on that day, right? Just showing up makes such a difference, because if you cannot show up, make it to the start line, you will definitely not make it to the finish line,
I
right?
think BBCH is going to see more registrations after this podcast, but it's too late, I think. By the time this podcast is out, it
Maybe for the next season, right?
yeah.
Like you asked me at the start of the podcast, what are the lessons that you learned? This is something that Manoj Bhatt, my ultra endurance running friend, has told that uh, if you don't make it to the start line, you're not going to obviously make it to the finish line. So it's showing up is half the battle. Show up and see what is the best you can do, and that attitude has actually helped me all through the season this year. I even for something like Bangalore Classic,
And even you're running.
yeah,
Yeah.
just showing up, right? I was sick 2 days before the run, but I just said, okay, I'll just show up and see how
You made
that
a
goes.
promise and a commitment to your friend and to yourself.
Right.
And you just showed up and you finished.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
a very fulfilling kind of situation where you don't expect anything,
Mm.
But just the finishing itself is reward enough.
Correct. So that we need not get all philosophical, but this is something that also is a part of Gita, right? Krishna says, do your work and don't worry about the results. And I think that mindset kind of helps in many areas of life.
They say the Gita was the first book on psychotherapy ever written.
Wow. Yeah. But yeah, so on that narratives we talked about and the mindset shift, how it helps us get better or keep showing up and do our best, right? So what are the some of the things that we can actually do? We talked about journaling, we talked about meditation. Anything else that can help us be in a good mindset or correct our narratives?
So I don't know whether we should use the word correct, because it's enough to just know what your narrative is. Many of us don't know our narrative.
Right.
So we have narratives about every single thing in our lives. We have narratives about ourselves. We have about our job, about our relationships, about our athletic performance, about our financial condition, various things, right? Just being in touch with this is how I think about my job. Being aware itself is empowering enough. And then seeing why, if you do have something negative, you may have something positive, great, because usually positive narratives are empowering, because that motivates you. It's just the way that we are wired biologically.
Right.
When you think positively about something, your dopamine system, your reward system kicks in, and it's like, let's do this, guys. But if it's negative, then it's just the opposite. Then you need to really spur yourself to do it, or push yourself. You don't find that internal drive to do something. So just being in touch that you have a certain negative mindset towards a particular area of your life itself is empowering enough, because then it starts getting you to think about why you have that negative mindset. And then it all comes down to really, like you said in the beginning, it's perceptions.
Right.
It's how, based on our past or based on things we've heard, right? You may have heard that the boss in your new job is like a real dictator and he's terrible. And then you go in with that negative mindset already, which is not empowering, but it might actually turn out to be something different. Maybe there's something else going on and you are just thinking about it negatively. It's the way you're perceiving and interpreting things, which is actually what's causing the problem, rather than that particular thing itself. So similarly, I think in our athletic pursuits, like I said in the beginning, I had this negative mindset about ITT that I didn't have to have it, but I just had it. And just getting in touch with that negative mindset itself changed my mindset towards it.
Right. And narratives, right? They dictate everything, including our athletic performance. Just the off camera we were talking about the milkshake study. Can you talk about?
There was an interesting study about chocolate milkshakes. So the same identical chocolate milkshake, which contained a certain number of calories and sugar and all that, was given to two groups of individuals. One group was told that this is a very healthy milkshake, doesn't contain too many calories or sugar. The other group was told this is a very rich milkshake with a lot of calories and sugar. Neither was right. They were both off by a certain percentage. That interestingly, in both groups, the investigators studied the level of the hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hormone that is responsible for regulating our appetite, works at the level of the brain. So when we eat, the ghrelin is suppressed. So that reduces our appetite. So we don't want to eat anymore. How we think about what we've eaten can also affect ghrelin levels. So that's what they found in these two groups of people. So in the group of people who thought they had a healthy milkshake, the ghrelin levels did not go down that much. Whereas in the group of people who thought that they had a very rich milkshake, the ghrelin levels fell to almost zero. So just the fact that they thought about the same milkshake in two different ways gave us two biological different responses. And this is where now we're beginning to understand that how mindset can actually affect our biology in our bodies in a very real way. So if you have a negative mindset about something, it's going to really affect your brain in a way that's going to negatively impact your performance in that particular field.
Right. It is not woo science. It is actually proper.
It's actually proper, hard, proven science.
That is very empowering to know. It's just that it's not just some people saying positive, stay positive with that this, but it really helps, right?
There's a famous saying, I think, therefore I am, right?
Right, yeah.
So when you think about a thing in a certain way, that makes you that person. There's some other motivational speakers who say, if you want to be a good father, for example, then just be good. Right? And you'll automatically be a good father.
Yeah. So yeah, that also kind of solidifies my kind of narrative shift that can help me in the how I approach races. I think thanks for
I think a lot of us are sitting on the fence or were sitting on the fence. I know I was about racing, and I think my narrative has also changed. Initially, after my crash in Goa, where I injured my shoulder and I took 3 months to recover, I said I'm never going to race again. I had to eat those words one day. But people think that I'm not fit enough, so I can't do this race. But if you change the narrative to, instead of blocking out that narrative completely, saying, no, that's nonsense, I am fit, which is not true, which may not be true. Instead, use that narrative to change your approach to, can I use this race to get fitter?
Exactly. So that is something that almost all of us at one point or the other have, and almost all most people who are who never got into racing also is something that stops them from starting, right? That narrative that I'm not fit enough to race, that I think like what you just said, if you can use racing to get fitter, right?
Also, there's no point in denying reality,
Mm,
right? Because that doesn't help you get over negative narratives.
right.
You have to accept realities. If you're not fit, yeah, you think you're not fit, that's fine. That's the reality for you.
Mm,
But then turn it around and use the difficulty. Like Michael Caine, the famous actor, says when he encountered difficulty during shooting of a movie and the movie scene had to be interrupted. And he asked the director, what do I do now? It's not supposed to go this way. So the director told him, use the difficulty.
right.
Improvise on the spot and just use the difficulty. And if it turns out fine, we'll use that scene. If not, we'll shoot it again.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So that is very, very empowering, is to say that you can use, you don't mean, it doesn't mean that you have to race, but for you can use the mindset for any scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Show up and do your best. We often underestimate our own ability, and overestimate whoever else is there going to show up. Also, I think that there is this thing about often we are, I think, being aware of ourselves. What is the narrative that is going on inside? Is it that you are not really fit enough, or something else is going on in your mind? Is it that you are so so focused on the result that you don't want to race unless you have a real chance of podium?
Yeah.
Right. So that, I think, is not a very helpful way to look at things. If that is the case, only 2-3 people should be actually racing.
Yeah, that's
right.
true. Yeah.
So because only those people have the ability to be on the podium.
Correct.
Right. So only Naveen Jawan or Srinath or whoever will be racing, and rest can sit at home.
Yeah.
But that is not the case, right? You go. It's a sport. Show up. Give your best. You might end up on the podium or not, but you will have a great time, and you learn, and you get fitter, and you learn a lot of things, right? Group riding.
And you have a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. That is the most important part, right? Excellent. So with that, let us shift our focus to something that that is also important, the mental health aspects of it, right? The last 2-3 years have been really hard for almost every one of us. So what are the things that are important to keep in mind for in terms of mental health of everyone?
So I think thanks to various things, most people are now very aware of what is generally regarded as a mental health crisis, particularly younger people. There are many reasons for that. Part of it is social media. Some of it is isolation. Social media is definitely one of the bigger culprits. Then we're living in an increasingly complex world. There are wars happening. There's a lot of friction.
Right.
There's a lot of uncertainty about futures, political uncertainty, various things. And naturally, the mental health issues seem to be on the rise. Now, whether that's just that people are more in touch with their own mental health is the point that remains to be answered, but it seems like that's the case. We do encounter more and more demand for mental health professionals, more and more demand for mental health services. More and more people are on medication for various mental conditions. What I believe is there's a huge role for exercise in treating mental health. There are now enough papers and scientific studies which show that using exercise as a form of treatment for people with major depressive disorders, anxiety, is actually shown to reduce the dose of medications that they need to be on.
Oh.
And you know that exercise, I'm a big proponent of exercise as a form of medicine, right? I keep saying on my Instagram channel, exercise is medicine.
Right.
Because there are so many health benefits of exercise. in probably ways that we don't even understand completely yet. And it's something that I also deeply believe in, because I know how exercise impacts my own mental health and my physical health, obviously.
Right.
So the ways in which exercise can influence the brain is myriad. There are neuromodulators, various chemicals that are released in the act of doing exercise. So the thing that you said about sweat every day.
Right.
Why? Because it helps us keep our mental balance. There are neuromodulators that affect the way our brains function. There are substances which are released from muscles called myokines. They're small peptides in response to exercise, which are known to improve our mood. There are endorphins. There are various other chemicals. We also know that when we don't exercise, our bodies tend to go into a state of what is called insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And when we have high levels of insulin in the body and also sometimes in the brain, that is known to predispose to early cognitive decline.
Wow.
So there are actually physical outcomes of not exercising. And physical outcomes is, when I say physical, I mean in the way the brain is structured.
Right.
Physical outcomes of exercising. So the MRI scans of people in their 60s and 70s who do regular exercise, and we know a very good friend of ours, Mr. Bell.
Right. Russell Bell. Yeah.
Who was an amazing athlete even into his mid 70s. So when they do MRI scans on people who do exercise, they find that their brains look better in terms of Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive decline than people who don't.
Right.
So I believe there's a huge correlation between exercise and mental health. Unfortunately, there's also the reverse correlation where poor mental health can affect your exercise performance.
Right.
So the time has come, I think, when all of us need to pay attention not only to our physical health, but also to our mental health. Because if you have a bad day, you don't sleep well, you're depressed or anxious or worried about something, you're not going to be able to perform well at your workout the next day. And in turn, that is going to affect your physical health,
Right.
which in turn is going to affect your mental health.
Yeah.
So it's actually a very vicious circle. And therefore, I think we all need to learn how to take positive steps towards maintaining good mental health, just the way we take positive steps towards maintaining our physical health.
Right. So you mentioned the effect of social media on mental health, right? There are myriads of negative effects, like comparing ourselves with others, because it is social media is highlights reel, right? For athletes, I think Strava also becomes a social media.
Yeah, that's true.
And comparing ourselves with others, and always feeling down that we are not doing enough. See, look at them, they are doing so much, and that thing kind of comes in, and it affects
the Strava envy.
It is a real thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
But like anything, it's also it has a positive. How we use it is very important, and you are using the social media very effectively to kind of educate a lot of people out there about various things regarding medicine and mental health and physical health and stuff. So I mean, you already have a huge following, but for those who are not not following you on Insta, I would highly recommend that. And
thank you.
I will link the profile link in the show notes for those who are not yet following. But what are the you make a lot of reels on various topics, right? What are some of the topics related to mental health that you have covered?
So one is that you mentioned social media, right? So this constant basically social media companies are designed to keep us on the platform for as long as possible. That's their only goal.
Right.
And they achieve that because it has an addictive capability. Also, if you look at our social interactions prior to the internet and social media, we used to maybe go down into our apartment buildings or onto the street and meet maybe 3 or 4 friends.
Right.
And then we would hear about their day. And it would be a fairly similar day to what we had. And maybe somebody had something exciting happening.
Yeah.
Whereas in social media, you can scroll through 100 accounts in 30 minutes.
Right.
And there are 100 ways to feel bad about yourself in those 30 minutes. So it's very impactful the way social media is presented. It's very quick and it's large volumes. And that can really lead to very negative beliefs about oneself.
Right.
That this friend has gone off on a holiday to the Maldives and this guy is cycling in Mallorca and this guy got a new bike and all those kinds of things.
Right.
So I think modulating our exposure to digital and social media is very important. And that's where one of my videos I talk about stop scrolling.
Right. Yeah.
And the effect of dopamine on our brains. So dopamine is a chemical that's crucially important in the reward pathway. So we have a specific pathway in the brain. And actually dopamine is what we call the molecule of more.
Yeah.
Because it's the molecule or the neuromodulator that makes us seek more. It's also important in movement. So motivation, like when you wake up in the morning, you want to get your workout done. That's dopamine talking to you.
Right.
Saying, I need to get this workout done. But dopamine also has a negative side to it. So too much of dopamine actually saturates the receptors on which dopamine acts. And then to achieve the same result, you need bigger and bigger levels of dopamine. It's like a drug. It's like if you're addicted to crack cocaine.
Right.
When you start, you need just a few grams. I don't even know what the measure is, but you need a little bit. But as you get more and more used to it, you need bigger and bigger doses to get the same effect.
The baseline keeps raising.
Shifting up.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing that happens with social media. So the more you expose yourself to it, the more of it you need to achieve the same feeling of contentment or happiness, whatever, transient feeling of pleasure.
Yeah.
Let's call it pleasure. So that's where the problem with social media comes in. And we know that when this effect, this sort of saturation effect of dopamine takes place, that leads to depression. Because dopamine and serotonin are cousins, which are related to the circuits responsible for depression. So, and when you do not get that social media, you go into dopamine withdrawal, which also leads to a depressed state, a sort of apathetic state where you're not motivated to move.
Wow.
So it's very serious. And we're seeing this in especially younger children, teenagers, not only in the US, but also here in our country.
Yeah.
That excessive exposure to social media is definitely got some serious downsides when it comes to mental health.
Right. The hours and hours of shorts and all that, because you want different kind of hit. Right.
I mean, I don't think people even have the patience to go through a 10-minute YouTube video nowadays.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is sad because probably at least YouTube has some decent content that you can learn from.
Yeah.
And something interesting where you can gain knowledge. Whereas on Instagram and Facebook and I don't know, TikTok, I've never tried. Twitter, I don't know too much about, now called X.
Right.
But these are all very transient and not that informative. Maybe there are a few, I shouldn't be saying that because I'm on Instagram myself, but generally things don't tend to be very informative. And you can, without realizing it, sometimes you can be spending an hour on it without even knowing where the time has gone.
Right. I mean, I'm telling myself every day that don't wake up after I wake up. I'm kind of telling myself not to go to the washroom with my phone, but it hasn't happened yet. Right. So there must be studies out there. The increase of time, how much
Yeah,
it
yeah, no,
goes
that
up
is there. It is.
if it is with the cell phone or without.
It's a known phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether any people can actually go to the washroom now and not have their phones with them. I don't know what they'll be doing. Like, what would they be even thinking, right?
What we used to do before.
Read a book, maybe.
Yeah. I need to work on that. Thanks for that. But so the mental health aspects of it, right? So what are some of the things that people can do to take care of their mental health as along with their physical health?
This may be a bit controversial, but I keep telling my colleagues and sometimes my patients that there are two types of therapy that every human being needs. One is psychotherapy and one is physiotherapy.
Right.
Now, the reason why I say this, although it's controversial, is that when we are growing up, we don't have a mental coach who tells us how to think. We just think based on cues around us, like how our parents think and how our friends think and how our teachers think and those sort of cues. And we learn how to think. But that thinking that we learn may not be a healthy way of thinking. And our parents and our siblings are often very strong influences in this regard. And I think as parents, both you and I, we should be also careful about how we pass on thinking skills to the next generation.
Right.
I think it's crucially important that every human being at least has 1 or 2 sessions with a psychotherapist to see how they think.
Right.
Is your thinking reasonably all right? Is it a healthy way of thinking? Or is it a way of thinking that's going to hurt you? Also, physiotherapy, because again, we're not taught how to move. We just start moving.
Right.
We just start walking and we start running and then we play cricket or we do some other sport. And then, in the middle, we acquire some really wrong ways of moving, which are not healthy for us. And it's only when you either get into a sport a little more seriously and do large volumes, while running or cycling, or you get a little older and you start getting niggles and aches and pains and you realize that, hey, there's something not right here. And then you go to a physiotherapist and he or she will give you a list of things that are wrong with you. Like your glutes are not getting activated and your posture is bad, your neck is bent and your shoulders are drooping and we never learn.
Right.
So I think one of the ways is to actually either do an online session with a psychotherapist, at least one, maybe do a mental health questionnaire. If you don't want to spend the time or the money seeing a psychotherapist, do a mental health questionnaire. Delve into yourself and see how you actually think about, are you thinking in a healthy way?
Right. Great. That really helps. I think I should also consider that. But now, let us get into something that is very relevant for us as aging athletes, the masters athletes of aging. How aging affects exercise or exercise affects aging. Let us dig a little deep into that aspect.
So aging, one of the things that happens, which is very clear with aging is, there are more than one thing, of course, but a few things that happen is a drop in your VO2 max. So typically most people will drop VO2 max starting from the age of 40. Approximately, there are age-related graphs for this. So they're normative data based on your age and your gender.
Right.
But if you're already not high up in your VO2 max when you're in your 30s and your 40s, then the decline is pretty sharp. And by the time you hit 70, your VO2 max is going to be pretty low. Now, VO2 max is a very interesting metric because it's something that's very closely linked to a measure called all-cause mortality.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you were to take all the, say, people in their between the ages of 60 to 70, and you stratify them based on their VO2 max, the population who's in the lower half have a higher chance of dying, irrespective of any other conditions.
Wow.
You can take out diabetes, hypertension, osteoporosis, heart disease, stroke. You can take out everything from that.
Right.
Just VO2 max. The ones in the lower half will have a higher risk of dying than the ones in the upper 50%, 50th percentile. So clearly VO2 max is something we should all be very wary about and careful about, and
Train it.
And keep training it so that it doesn't decline. It is going to decline.
Right.
Invariably.
Maybe the rate of decline would be less.
Correct. The rate of decline would be less. You need to perform certain daily activities in your 70s or your 80s. You need to have a VO2 max of about 30, say 20 to 30. So if you need to be able to pick up a bag, you want to travel by air, pick up a 10 kg bag. You need to be able to hold a grocery bag and walk from the grocery store to your house. Maybe climb a flight of stairs. You need a VO2 max of about 20 to 30, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
If your VO2 max when you're 40 is, say, 35, you can imagine by the age of 70, you're not going to be anywhere close to 20.
Yeah. Right.
So this is where we need to start thinking about this very early in life. It's okay if you start in your 60s, you'll probably prevent the sharp decline. But starting in your 40s is even better. Right?
Yeah. So for reference, for elite athletes, the VO2 is what?
90 to 100. I mean, I think Pogacar has somewhere in the 90s, mid 90s.
Okay. And we would be maybe in the 50s or something like that?
I guess. I mean, I have a Garmin measurement of my VO2 max from the Garmin app.
Kind of estimate.
Yeah, which is about 50 or 52, 53 types, which is fairly good for my age. But
right. So we need to make efforts to maintain it.
Yes.
Right. So that is a good enough motivation for me to start, not neglect my VO2 intervals. Right. Good. So
actually, interestingly, in some countries now, so when you have patients in the geriatric age group in their 70s, very often they end up needing some kind of surgical procedure like knee replacement, hip replacement, spine surgery, cardiac surgery. The anesthesia team, the ones who are responsible for getting them through the surgery with the least amount of comorbidity or complications, they've actually done a study where they've tested the VO2 max of these people, and they found that the ones with the poorer VO2 max end up with higher risk of complications.
Right.
The other thing that they did is they took some patients who didn't need surgery that early, who had low VO2 max, and they put them through an exercise program, simple exercise program, monitored, and then remeasured their VO2 max. And then they had another group where they didn't do any intervention. They just left their VO2 max as it was. And they found that the groups that were put through exercise to improve their VO2 max did better than the group that did not.
Not surprising. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just another thing where exercise is medicine, right? Coming to my mantra.
Yeah. Exercise is medicine. That is something that I take away from this conversation. So what else can aging athletes or can keep in mind?
So another thing that's very important is, of course, the loss of muscle mass and muscle strength as we age. So there's something called age-related sarcopenia. Sarco being muscle, penia being weakness.
Right.
So again, now if we start with the baseline muscle mass in our 30s and 40s, which is good, then usually sarcopenia is estimated to happen at a rate of approximately 10% per decade after the age of 40.
Wow.
So if you have a certain muscle mass in your 40s, by the time you're 70, you would have lost approximately 30% of that.
Okay.
Muscle strength is a different metric. So mass itself is one metric. Muscle strength, that is the force that your muscles generate, essentially, need not be necessarily linked to the size of your muscles. You can still generate a good amount of force from muscle without it having to be too big.
Right.
So hypertrophy versus strength. So muscle strength declines at an even faster rate, approximately 2 to 3% per year after the age of 40. And then you talk about something known as speed. Right? How fast your muscle can contract and how fast it can stop contracting.
Right.
So concentric versus eccentric. That also declines very rapidly, almost to the same as muscle strength after the age of 40.
Right.
These are things, along with reduction in bone density, which will predispose the elderly population to falls,
Mm.
because muscles help insulate our joints and bones. When you have strong muscles, obviously you're able to keep yourself upright and prevent yourself from falling. You have quick reflexes, speed, then you can stop yourself from sustaining a serious fall. And if you have good eccentric muscle strength, where you have basically eccentric is how to put brakes on a movement. You need muscles to brake your movement as well.
Right.
So if you have good brakes, then also you can stop from falling.
Right.
So again, this is something that people in their 30s and 40s need to be aware of. You need to focus on muscle strength, resistance training, strength training, so that you age in a manner where you're still functional in your 60s and 70s. Now, I know people will say, hey, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I may drop dead tomorrow. You may not.
Yeah.
You may end up in a situation in your 70s or 80s where you need surgery. You're in pain. And you need surgery to get rid of that pain and to improve your quality of life. If you're in a state of health where you're a high surgical risk, you may not even be able to undergo that surgery.
Right.
So that is a much more serious issue than, dropping dead tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. That thing that you mentioned about being being a little muscular might help take out some of the chances of fractures and stuff. I've seen very recently with our good friend
Sangram. Yes.
So he is a big gym goer and has healthy amount of muscles.
That's true.
And he didn't need surgery after his collarbone after his crash.
Dramatic crash.
Yeah, and while similar crash, we ended up breaking the bones in a severe way that it needed surgery, but his musculature was there to kind of maybe keep it in place or whatever.
So you managed to get your podcast out even when you had the surgery?
I had some
backup
episodes.
Amazing.
So yeah, that having backup episodes when I didn't talk about it before, but when my brother was hospitalized sometime back, I didn't have any backup episodes at that time, so I took him to hospital. We came back I think by 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the night, and that was Saturday, and there was no episode that was lined up. So I after he went to bed, after coming back from the hospital, I recorded an audio only episode for 20 minutes and published that. I think that was the only time it was no backup, and I was about to miss.
That was a solo episode.
That was a solo episode and audio only episode that I recorded in a dark room alone after spending the whole day.
Amazing commitment still.
I mean, that is just that promise that I made myself to keep going. Probably not many people listen to that episode itself, but
but you had a continuous streak, unbroken streak.
Right. It's a promise that I made to myself and wanted to keep it. At the end of the day, I'm doing this for an audience of one. Right? So
yeah,
that's what it is. And coming back to the muscle and the how important keeping muscle fitness and strength as we age. I see this Sangram's case as a case in point.
Yes.
I mean, maybe a case of one, n of one, but that is what we can see, right? Not research backed, maybe, but it's an example that I see in front.
No, I think there is some research on
yeah, research that is there.
I mean, science to say that muscle strength and resistance training does make a difference to injuries. Even I think they've done that in NFL players, NBL players, whatever, NBA basketball.
Right. So that research has an example in front of
Yes.
us.
Yeah. Real world example.
Correct. So yeah, great. Anything else? We talked about the importance of maintaining VO2 max as we age, maintaining strength and conditioning as we age. Anything else comes to mind?
I think bone density is one thing that comes to mind. I see in my practice nowadays a lot of, especially women, with extremely poor bone density. And I think falls in the elderly are one of the biggest problems with worsening quality of life and ultimately mortality.
Right. Yeah.
So there's something like, I think in the US, fracture of the hip, approximately 30% of people who fracture their hips and either undergo or not able to undergo surgery die at the end of 1 year.
Wow, that's a big number.
Because they're not able to. So, being mobile, being active, ambulant is crucially important at that age. Because the moment you are in a situation where you're bedridden, it's typically a downhill scene from there. It also matters because a lot of these people are diabetics. And if you don't exercise, then your blood sugars go out of control. Your blood pressure goes out of control. You start putting on weight. All these are negative factors for, various other things, cardiovascular disease, strokes, etc., cancer even. So I think maintaining, of course, we already talked about VO2 max, muscle strength, muscle speed, muscle endurance, muscle size to some extent. Bone density is another thing. Because if you do fall at that age, and even if it's a trivial fall, you have weak bones, you are going to sustain a fracture. Operating and fixing those bones is even more challenging than fixing regular bones. Right. Because your implants don't hold as well. So you need special implants and more prolonged, more complicated surgery sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. So I think a lot of awareness amongst people needs to go in. And how do you maintain bone density? Right. So doing exercise that involves some form of impact or strength, doing strength training is another thing, because muscles and bones are very closely linked to each other. So doing strength training is important to maintain bone density. Doing something with impact, avoiding obesity, because fat is known to worsen bone density. So I think all these things need to be kept in mind, especially for the aging population.
Right.
And in women, especially those who are close to menopause, the importance of monitoring their bone density is also very important. Because if you catch it early, then you can prevent it from progressing. Whereas you wait too late, then the treatments are more difficult, take longer, not as effective. Right. So monitoring bone density early in life, usually I advise most women in their 40s to get a baseline DEXA scan to see where their bone density is at. If it's very minimally affected, then lifestyle will help. If slightly more affected, then certain other things will help.
Great. We covered quite a few things. Skipper, thanks for you came right from the
I came from hospital. I was in the OR in the morning, but I came from the hospital.
Thank you for taking the time.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Venki, or either on camera or off camera. And I really want to thank you and congratulate you for what you've done with the Working Athlete podcast. It's been absolutely amazing and spectacular to watch how it's grown. And thank you for taking your time and your energy out to put out these messages to the world at large. I'm sure a lot of people out there, even though they may not say it, greatly appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. And thank you for taking the time. And we should do this more often.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my conversation with Dr. Arvind. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying these podcasts and are finding them useful, please consider supporting the podcast by subscribing to it on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.